All right. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Common Good Conversations, a podcast working to create deeper narratives at the intersection of faith, politics, and social issues for the common good in West Michigan. My name is Nick Brock. I'm the executive director for Vote Common Good West Michigan, and co-hosting the program with me is Mr. Shawn Skinner.
How we
Shawn,
doing?
how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm just entertained watching you just suffer there for a second, trying to get all this stuff working properly. It's
Yeah,
pretty
we, we
entertaining.
we've had some glitches, and we're working our way through it, but I think we've finally succeeded.
Yeah,
We're a
yeah.
bunch of amateur podcasters, so we're
Just
learning
two of
on the
us.
go. We're learning on the go. So, hey, Shawn, today we have the privilege of having Mr. Doug Pagitt from Vote Common Good. So, Doug is the executive director of Vote Common Good, where their mission is to inspire, energize, and mobilize people of faith to make the common good their voting criteria. And they also train and support candidates to connect with evangelical and Catholic voters. Doug, welcome to the program.
Yeah, right on. It's like a meeting of the executive director. Shawn, are you an executive director of anything?
No, but I'm a business owner, so I guess I could label myself whatever I'd like.
You're the executive director of
Sewing machines and marine upholstery.
You're the president of your own company, Shawn. You can just
There you go.
dub yourself that.
I'm a president,
It's real
owner,
easy.
CEO, FSO, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, but we can make you co-host extraordinaire for
There we
our
go.
purposes
There
today.
you go.
So, Vote Common Good, and Doug, you have a podcast, and I want to talk a little bit about this podcast and this really interesting segment that you do on a weekly basis called Red Hat, Blue Hat. So the whole premise is that you talk with a long-term friend of yours who has more of a conservative and Republican bend, and then you take the position from a more progressive and Democrat bend. So tell us about how this all came together and the purpose of these Red Hat, Blue Hat conversations.
Yeah, well, Casey Franklin is the person that I'm in this conversation with. And Casey and I have been friends since I was an intern at a church in the youth ministry when he was a high school senior. So I was in college, he was, high school senior, and we've been friends since then. So we have very similar backgrounds. We both come from Minnesota. We had a similar experience in church. We've both been faith leaders. All of these things are similar. The thing we differ on most intensely is not just politics and Republican, Democrat. It's really Donald Trump. And we've been texting for the last year and a half pretty intensely about a whole lot of things, usually to have to do with Trump. And I wanted to take that conversation and make it more accessible to other people, because I know a lot of other people have similar friendships, maybe long-term, or maybe it's a relationship in a family. Maybe it's a child or a parent or a spouse. And they're like, we can have so much commonality on so many things. And then we get to Donald Trump, and it is as if we don't recognize one another at all. And so I wanted to take our conversations and to make them more public so other people could watch our interactions and let both of us serve as a bit of a surrogate for their own experience and their own thinking. And this is actually something that I started just after Trump was elected in 2016. I immediately reached out on social media and started asking around for a faith leader who voted for Trump and would support Trump and would talk with me. So I did that with a different person. We did a 7-week thing called Untrumped, which is also a podcast people can listen to. And for 7 weeks in a row, for an hour or so each week, we went live, like I'm doing with Casey, both video and audio. And we talked about this stuff. And that's part of a longer pursuit that I have, to try to deeply understand why people support Donald Trump. Because that's the work I do, is to try to get people to stop voting for him fundamentally. And I really want to keep this all very human and personal. And I want there to be deeper understanding. After Donald Trump is gone, I want all of us to understand each other and what was motivating all that. So that's really what the pursuit is.
Yeah, that I find that very intriguing because just to give a little more context for our listener is so Doug and I um, have worked together on these national tours. So Doug and Vote Common Good invited me to come on these tours beginning in 2020 to go hang out on this big bus, sleep on the bus, and eat food from gas stations and stay at hotels where there's always the same coffee. So during these times together, Doug, you and I have plenty of conversations, but noticing too that in these conversations, just in general, you would always mention this friend of yours who you're texting with, and you're talking about Trump and so on and so forth. And for a long time, I was wondering, well, who is this friend? And it turns out that it is this Casey now who is on the Red Hat Blue Hat, and even the tour in 2022 talking about Christian nationalism. You would say, I want to talk about Christian nationalism in a way that my friend Casey, if he was here, he would agree with me. So I find that very intriguing. And so, which brings me to Shawn and why Shawn is here this morning and why we're doing this together. Because, after 2020 and I come home off of the Vote Common Good tours, I was like, I'm now involved in politics. I want to talk with somebody. And so when I get to a family event, Shawn's here. And so Shawn and I started talking about politics, and we found out that over the past 3 years, like we could actually talk about things in a way with nuance and be able to really appreciate different perspectives. So Shawn, you were going to look for your Make America Great Again hat again, but you couldn't find.
Yeah, I misplaced it. I must have misplaced it. It's that important that I misplaced it.
Yeah,
so,
well, maybe you should wear it more often just to bring me some chuckles in the program.
Well, it's hard. It's hard because there was I supported Trump in 2016 and everything, but I'd be open enough to say that I don't want him to run again. I think there's and honestly, I don't want Biden to run again either. I want two solid new candidates if we can. I don't see that happening, but I don't like the way it's laying out as it is in general. But I didn't mind Trump when he was in office, but now between everything, I think it's become very, very toxic in general. So I just think we need to wipe the slate clean a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Doug. So, like picking up a little bit on that, you with Casey, you talk about what Biden's doing and what Trump's doing, and this back and forth. How would you say that those conversations are going between you and Casey? How would you just describe those conversations?
Well, we approach things a little differently. I'm a little bit more analytical and a little bit more just kind of deeply informed and care a lot about the positions on both sides than Casey is. Like Casey to his, and he'll say this, I think I'm speaking for him and he'd be comfortable with this. And he says it on the podcast. He doesn't spend any time thinking about how Democrats think about things. He doesn't care. He thinks Democrats he says it out loud, are socialists, are Marxists, are bad for America. And he doesn't think that there's anything really valuable that comes from a Democratic perspective. He's not interested in deeply knowing and understanding that.
Seems like a smart man.
Yeah, and that's actually something I hear a lot from Trump supporters. Like the thing that I've concluded from my conversation with Casey is Donald Trump is the stand-in as opposition to what they're fundamentally against, which is Democrats.
Yeah.
So most often people are like, I think Democrats are a problem. Now, some of them are just like, I think they have bad fiscal policy. Some of them I think they're bad on social issues. Some of them believe that they harvest the blood and organs of babies and run sexual abuse rings at the highest level of the government. So across the spectrum, there's people who think these people are bad for America and are some level of a threat. Sometimes a threat to their own well-being, but a threat certainly to America and therefore to the globe. And therefore, Donald Trump anything he does is not as bad as that.
Yeah.
And so if he prevents Democrats from being in power, then it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So
the lesser of two evils kind of a conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like 2016 was a lot of that. You had Trump and you had Hillary Clinton. And I don't think anybody necessarily would have felt super good on either side other than going, well, if I get Hillary, we get the first female president. But I didn't feel like the choices were 2020 didn't feel like the choices were the greatest things in the world either, though.
Yeah.
Well, so here's, I've listened to Red Hat, Blue Hat at every opportunity that I could just to, understand the conversation. Is how do we work with, from somebody who admits that, hey, they're not doing much research into the other side. Hey, I'm hearing this and that, and so I'm going to oppose that because of X, but my reasons aren't really, there. Where if we're talking with somebody like that who's not doing more of of some broad research into the things, where are we supposed to think that they're getting their information? Like, how do we then talk with them? Because we're talking apples and oranges here, like different things. And how can you have a conversation that goes somewhere to its logical conclusion, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. Well, look, I'm the outlier in the country. Someone who, like, I follow politics the way some people follow sports. Like, I know the insider people, and I find it entertaining. I like policy. I like reading about things. I like listening to it. So I keep up on it at an extremely high level. Almost no one does that. Right. So whether you're a Democrat or an independent or Green Party member or Republican, you're not spending time thinking about policy issues. Nobody does, and then there's a statistical rounding error of the people who do, right? This teeny number of people, and folks aren't supposed to. So I am not here to say the thing that's going to be the solution to us understanding each other and living well in a country of difference is that we have to understand the policy positions that each other holds. And I wasn't trying to suggest that by like, how does the conversation go? I was just noting that's an imbalance. So Casey and I sort of approach this differently, which I think is also helpful for some people to recognize. Look, anybody who can name a House bill number, House bill number 57 is you are so fractionally, it's such a fractionally small number of people. Anybody who knows the names of cabinet secretary members. Could be anybody who can name the vice president's name off the top of their head is probably in the top 50% of.
Go, Shawn. Who is it?
Kamala Harris.
All right. Thank you.
I was trying to think of like Ronald Reagan,
So look,
switch it up.
People just don't follow politics. And politics is not fundamentally about policy when it comes to voters. Voters vote out of identity and how they see themselves. And they vote in a way that makes them feel like they're a good person. So voting is like one of the public things we do, or things we do for the public good, that we get to count. So people put a lot of weight on it when they vote, but not for a policy. In fact, you could pick anybody. You could name me and say, hey, what matters to you in life, Doug? And I would tell you the things that matter. And they say, well, how do the Biden policies, or how did the Obama policies advocate for that? Or how did the Trump policies destroy that? And you'll find all kinds of inconsistencies, right? You'll find things where it's like, well, if it was strictly policy, because that's not what it's about. We tell ourselves that it's policy because it reinforces the choices we've already made. Look, it's kind of like in advertising. Advertising only does a couple of things. What advertising doesn't do is convince you to do something you don't want to do. It doesn't get you to buy something you don't want.
Sure, right? Sure, that's what they try to do, though.
Yeah. Advertising and smart advertisers are doing two things. They're either convincing you that you made a good choice when you previously purchased their item. That's a huge endeavor in advertising. or they're trying to let you know that something that you may want exists. They're not spending any money getting you to do something you don't want to do. What they might be doing is saying, you might want something you didn't know about, the iPhone 16 or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that existed. I want it. Look, you can advertise all day long the Android phone to me. I don't want one. It's not going to work. You're not going to convince me I want one by telling me how much better the camera is, which probably is, how much faster the operating system is, which better is, how much more advanced the apps are, which they probably are. I don't care. I'm not going to buy one, right? Politics are very similar. You're not convincing people to buy policy when they vote. You're convincing people they did a good thing when they voted. Mm-hmm. Or you got what you asked for, like you're playing a game of crazy eights. And so we tell ourselves a story about what politics is. So I don't think the answer is, let's dig deep into policy, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I do think we should, I have this little shtick, and Nick, I'm sorry to put you through this. You have to hear it again. We should always ask 3 questions when we're in a conversation of difference, and political difference is one of those. But that is, what do you believe? And we should really listen to people about what they believe, because sometimes we think we know what they believe, and we're like, oh, I didn't really have that right. Why do you believe that? Like, from where did you get your information, and so on? And then the third, I think, fundamental question, which we should always be pursuing, is why does that matter to you? What function does your belief play in your life? How does it serve you? Because if we don't know that beliefs serve us in some way, no matter what they are, the belief about your personal style, the belief about how you think the world operates, your belief about the moon landing, all of this stuff functions in some way and performs a duty or performs an action in your life, in your mind. What's coming from that belief? What's it doing? Because if you don't know that, and if people don't know it for themselves, then you fundamentally don't have any idea what motivates the person. Because most of us are not motivated on the thing that is, on the label of our belief. Mm-hmm. It's usually something much deeper. So my fundamental work in life is to try to help all of us understand ourselves and one another so that we can endeavor in greater human flourishing. And that has to come through conversations with people who think differently than we do. Fundamentally, because all of us are going to be living with someone who thinks differently than we do. Because in 10 years, we're not going to be thinking the same as we do right now. None of us will. We will all change. And you're going to be living with yourself who is now changed and thinks differently about something, probably some things that are meaningful even. Mm-hmm. And you have to reconcile, how are you now living with this person called you in the future? And so a lot of this really has to do with our own internal understanding of ourselves. And can we develop a competency to do that?
Yeah, Shawn, I've you've made the remark in previous podcasts where you have a disdain for identity politics and how it works out in the public sphere, and how politicians really try to lever that piece of it. Does that, I wonder, in hearing about how to try to move away from these identity politics, these tribal things. How does that hit you about, these fundamentally what Doug talked about is, what do you believe? Why do you believe it? How does it matter to you, or how does it function in your life? How does that, bounce off of you?
I find it really interesting because I think I'm pretty relatable in that, in terms of like, my idea of trying to, get my head wrapped around politics a little bit more. A big part of it is this podcast, is to be able to have discussions with people that I, wouldn't normally have discussions with. Talk about things that I may not have the drive to go research and everything as well. Nick, you and I, we've had plenty of conversations over a couple bourbons and a cigar here or there. And we have really in-depth conversations over things that I feel more emotional on than I do, just like morally feel emotional on, despite whether it's a Democrat or Republican. But the concept that I is how I feel about it. And I think he's kind of hitting it on the head a little bit, that everybody feels differently. Maybe they don't know what a candidate's really running on, but maybe they feel like they relate with that that person better in a moral type thing. Which makes me feel I don't want to put my morals along with Trump's because I voted for him 2016.
Right.
But I didn't feel like I had any better morals along with Hillary Clinton at that particular time either. So as far as the identity politics, I've never liked. I feel like the idea of identity politics feels like they're looking at us like the public is a bunch of dummies going, if we roll this way, this group of people will follow us because I know this group of people will follow us like a bunch of lemons or something. And I feel like that's a disservice a little bit to the communities to feel like we have to be dumbed down. I've said this on a couple of different podcasts before. And it's I don't really like saying it, but it's an easy one to kind of go back to. But Biden going, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Things like that. Like I said, I don't like saying that, but that's a pretty blunt, thing that he did say. And it kind of represents a little bit of what identity politics looks like in my eyes. You guys might look at it differently and, as far as identity politics, but I feel like that looked like a real big red flag of how, and same thing with the Republicans running with the evangelicals and running to look a little bit more like a Christian-based church, God-fearing side of how they run, is considered identity politics too. So I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like I get looked at like it's a dumbed down type of thing just because we want your vote, opposed to a better or worse type of, situation. That's why I kind of hate that type of stuff.
Well, so recognizing that the politics are driven a lot by emotion. People invest a lot into this. Doug, how do you remain friends with Casey? After a very passionate discussion, how do you continue to move forward? Because we're having these heated discussions in our own family units with friends, and then people say, all right, I can't be friends with you. I can't go to this thing and participate with that, or I can't even go to this faith community that I once participated with. How do you, continue to move forward through these heated, just heated discussions?
Well, there's a couple of things. Well, one is it's a perspective, right? And just saying, I want to have a perspective that I can have real difference. And look, it's easier for Casey and I because we live in two different states. He lives in Colorado. I live in Minnesota. We text and we talk, every other week or so on the podcast, and we're not hanging out every day and stuff. So that's a little different. Okay. But there's kind of a perspective of like keeping this thing alive. Then there's just a set of practices that I think really matter for any relationship you're going to keep going. We talk about a lot of other stuff. If we do it on the podcast, we end each podcast with both of us playing a song of some kind. I'm new to guitar. Casey's been playing his whole life. We exchange a lot of guitar stuff. We talk about kids. We just talk about other stuff too. So we make a deliberate practice of there being other things. And I really do want the best for Casey. Like I really do not see him as a threat. There's days where I think, but if he lived in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, or Arizona, where his vote would matter, doesn't matter if Casey Franklin supports Donald Trump. He lives in Colorado, right? It just doesn't make any difference. His belief's not going to make Donald Trump president or not. Just who cares, right? So there's kind of a functional side to it. And then I also have to check myself because like the other day I was listening to a podcast of a guitar shop that I was going to buy a guitar from, and I started to get an inkling that this guy might be a Trump supporter. And I was like, I am not buying a guitar from a Trump supporter. Like that's what went through my head, right? And I had to kind of check myself, like, really? Right? Like, I don't know this guy at all. I've interacted with him on a purchase. I've purchased a guitar from him before, and I listened to the podcast and stuff, and I'm like, huh, I have no idea what motivates him. I don't know how this, if he is, I don't even know if he is, but I don't know how this serves him. I don't know what's going on. I'm just like saying, oh, someone like that, I'm not going to do business with. What am I now? Some baker that won't bake cakes for a gay couple? Like I'm that guy, right? Okay, so that's that like internal questioning of myself. Am I behaving in ways where I think I don't want to have anything to do? Like I'm sort of making this person, you know, I'm branding them in such a way that they're sort of vile to me and I'm going to stay away from. Once I realize I'm doing that in my life, now I'm not talking about personal difference. And look, I believe Donald Trump is a hazard to the well-being of this planet and everyone who lives on it if he's the president of the United States. I think he was a detriment to the country as president. What he's done since being president makes it even more clear if he was ever president again. But it's not personal. I don't hate Donald Trump. I don't want to hate Trump supporters. I recognize, though, that there's real consequence to some of these things. And I have to do the work I can do to make sure the outcome that I want politically doesn't happen, that Trump's not going to be elected president. But not turn this somehow into dehumanizing a person who thinks differently than I do about this. Can I tell you one story about that?
Yeah, go for it.
In 2017, when Trump was first elected, the first April of his first after he was elected, they had passed that tax bill that was supposed to boost the economy and do all this good stuff, you know. Trying to wipe the smirk off my face because that clearly didn't work, right? Whatever the plan was in that thing didn't work. But he came to Minnesota, near where I live, to brag about it, which is what people do. They go barnstorming after they pass legislation. So he came to this small little factory about 20 miles from where I live. This was the same time that he was starting to attack Ilhan Omar, who was my congresswoman. And this was big political news, but really big in Minnesota, telling her to go back where she came from because she was born in Somalia and came to the United States as a refugee. She's not a real American, all this kind of stuff. And so there was all this tumult about that. And when a president comes, people rally up. It just happens everywhere they go. But in a small little road in front of this little factory in Shakopee, Minnesota, lined on one side of the road were Trump supporters with Trump signs that wanted to see the motorcade come in and cheer him on. And on the other side were Ilhan Omar supporters. And the road is a little 2-lane road, right? You can imagine, you know, everywhere in the country, the same thing. So I don't know, you're 30 feet apart, 40 feet apart. And I had a radio show at the time on a radio station here in Minnesota. So I was going back and forth across the road, interviewing people on both sides. And here's what people on both sides of the street said. They looked across the street and they would point. When I would say, how are you feeling? What's going on? What are you experiencing? They would point across the street and say, I have no idea who those people are. Now, these people tend to look alike. It was more racially diverse on the Ilhan Omar side, but not completely. These people all lived within driving distance on a Thursday morning of this little road, right? Like you are literally neighbors. And now you're looking across the road saying, I don't know who those people are and I don't trust them. They both said this about each other. And nearly everyone, I probably talked to 30 Trump supporters, nearly all of them also said some version of, you know, I'm not a bad person for voting for Donald Trump. And I said, well, who said you're a bad person? They're like, well, they are, and you probably are. I see you walking across the road. This one person said to me and said, my kids say it. My mom says it. And there was this sense that Trump supporters felt like other people were telling them that there's something wrong with them for what they did. They were feeling a sense of public shame and didn't feel it internally, but felt the angst of that. And I found that really interesting, that we found a way to look across at neighbors and say, I don't know who you are. I don't trust you. And one group of those people felt like the others were saying there's something wrong with me. And that is not the makeup of that's not the setting of a great society, right?
Mm-hmm.
It may have always been there, but for it to come out like this, and look, there's no doubt Donald Trump, in my view, there's no doubt Donald Trump as a unique character not only brought that out, but generated it. He used it. He said, they hate you because they hate me. And he identified, Bill Clinton was famous for having said, I feel your pain. Donald Trump was saying to his supporters, you need to feel my pain. I'm not going to take on your burdens and solve them. You need to take on my burdens as my supporters. And it flipped the script on people. And all of a sudden stuff was just wacky. And it stayed that way, man, for, I don't know, like at least through today.
I was going to say still.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder then, with that story, I think that's a great piece to move us into this next segment, talking about Christian nationalism. Because one of the pieces that you lay out, Doug, in talking about Christian nationalism is how to engage with those who adhere to that, form of political ideology. And one of those ways, or the two of the ways, is empathy and engagement. So again, taking that visual of, a 2-lane road and people are on one side and the other pointing at each other. Like, how do we talk about these things in real ways? So, one of those examples that you're doing now with the podcast is Red Hat, Blue Hat. But when we talk about Christian nationalism, it's an animating, emotional thing for people to engage themselves in politics, and it stems from their particular faith views. So I guess just a very basic question is, what is Christian nationalism? How do we define it? What is it? What is it not?
It's both like a technical answer to that. Like, technically, what is a Christian nation? There are Christian nations where they identify that there's a Christian basis for the nation. There have been in history, and there are now. There are Hindu nations. There are Buddhist nations. There are Muslim nations, right, where the structural situation is that those religions receive additional benefits to any other religions. They're secular nations. The United States has an identity crisis, and there's a major disagreement about this country as to, are we a Christian nation or not? If you ask people, is America a Christian nation, and they say yes, that doesn't mean they're a Christian nationalist, because there's some people who say, yeah, we're a Christian nation and we need to stop being that, so we're working hard to stop it. I know some people who are working to end Christian nationalism who believe the nation's a Christian nation, right? Or like it was founded as a Christian nation. Like, no, it wasn't founded as a Christian nation. It was founded as a secular nation. So there's that question, right? Like, what's the nature of the actual structure of our government? It's a little more complicated for some people than they might want, and it's less complicated than other people want. So there were states, there were colonies that were started as religious colonies. That was the point of them, Pennsylvania being one of them. But when we formed a union, that decision was made that no religion would have preference at all. There would be freedom of religion, freedom from the government, and freedom to practice and not to practice, and no extra benefit would go to any religion or any religious practice over any others. None would be held down, and none would be boosted up. But there's a lot of people who think, yeah, but Christianity is the default, or maybe Judeo-Christian understanding is the default. And we're gracious. We'll let all the others in. Sure, we'll let atheists live here. We'll let Buddhists live here. We'll let Taoists live here. But, it's Christian. That's why we do that, because it's one of our Christian teachings. Like, okay, yeah, that's not. So there's a disagreement about this. Like, I would say it's structurally, it couldn't be more clear that this was a nation that started as a non-sectarian, non-religious nation that wanted to provide.
How does that roll over into politics then?
So that's a great question, because the next question then is, what's the role of religious people in a society like ours? Well, it's not that you should take your religion and set it aside. You might want your religion to be a motivator for you. You might want your religion to be an organizing principle for gathering people together. So how do you utilize your religion in a way that functions inside of a secular society? So one of the answers to that is to try to make the country be more Christian in its essence, not in its structure, not in its government, not in its functioning, but in its essence.
And
Let's be like leaven in the bread that affects the whole system and makes the whole place better. Now, there's people on all sides of politics that want to do that. You could take some of Martin Luther King Jr.'s call to civil rights and find that narrative. You could find the end of slavery narratives there. You could find the peace movements to stop war there. You could even find people who want to advocate for war trying to utilize that stuff. I don't want to give a lot of credit to that, because I think they have to bend the teachings a lot. But they're all kind of motivated by these things. Now, that's fair game, right? Every person should be motivated by whatever in a free society, and let that be your motivation. Where I think things we have to have a very clear distinction, though, is there's a difference between what motivates you and what power in government you use to exercise the completion of that motivation. You don't get to use the government power to fulfill your purpose. You have to fulfill that purpose by some other citizenry action. And the new version of Christian nationalism that's most threatening now, that's most alive and well, is one that wants to see the United States be a beacon of Christian narrative in the world, and wants to take over the power of the government to utilize it for that purpose. They call it the Seven Mountains movement. There's a particular theory around all this. And it's a Christian view that says Christians should try to attain significant influence and power in 7 different areas of civic life. And politics is one of those. But so is the media, so is business, so is education. Like, there's a number of these areas that they want to have greater influence in. So there's a lot of people who are taught, let your light shine before men and don't put it under a bushel, right? Be an influence, be a benefit and blessing to the world. So people are like, well, then I want to have my business run in a way that feels like it brings about the aspirations of God in the world.
Yeah.
Right. I might run an upholstery shop, but I also I don't want to separate my faith from my work. And then people are like, and if I run for office, then I want that to happen in public service. And this is where things get a little funny, right? You think about that person in, I don't know where it was, Tennessee or something. She was like the county clerk, and she felt that gay marriage was an abomination before God. And so she wouldn't give people marriage licenses as the county clerk. Like, she was having a hard time separating her own beliefs and convictions from her job as the public hired person. So this is where it gets iffy. So some of the work we're trying to do is both, to say, look, you don't have to worry. There is no Christian nation heritage we have to try to keep. Didn't start as one, started as a secular society with Christians and non-Christians in it. But this movement of like, let your light shine before all people and don't put your light under a bushel and have influence in every area of society, that's the thing that really has the energy. And that's where most people go to churches and they're like, we should just let's just have more Christianity, more places, because it's good for the world. Mm-hmm. Which is a real thing if you're a Christian. If you're not a Christian, you might not think Christianity is the best thing going for the world, right?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about this that a most recent example of this, on display in, national government. The Republican Party, with the House, I finally selected a speaker, Mike Johnson, correct, from Louisiana, and it's been noted of him that he is very much a Christian nationalism, wanting to, institute. The things that you've mentioned, Doug, into the role of government, writ large. And I know that this is part of the presentation that you and I will be sharing on in a few weeks in Grand Haven, November 30th, in Holland. So, can you just walk us through briefly what Christian nationalism looks like on display through the Speaker of the House?
Well, it's unclear how he's going to utilize his power as the Speaker of the House in this way. His view, by his own statement, is he was recounting how reporters were asking him questions about how he views policy and the world, because he's new. He's new to Congress, fairly new. People don't know who he is, so they're like, "Hey, this person's going to have a lot of influence. We don't know who it is. How does this person, Mike Johnson, think about the world?" And his answer was, "I said to reporters, go look at the Bible, and that will tell you my worldview." Well, that is an insufficient answer in relationship to your job as the Speaker of the House. That would be an insufficient answer to any question about how you view things related to your job. I've been a pastor for my entire life. That's an insufficient answer for what's your view as a pastor.
It's like easy out.
The Bible is it does not create an understanding of all the things, right? There's a whole lot of questions about being a pastor that you don't go to your Bible for those things about what does it mean to be a pastor. You might go to them for the details of the specifics of your faith, but not for your decision about what kind of cleaning products you think we should utilize, in the custodial side of caring for the building. You're probably not going to the book of Leviticus and talking about what fibers should be connected to each other, right? That's just not what you do. And it's an insufficient answer. It's a profoundly insufficient answer if you ask your surgeon what his approach to the surgery is going to be. And it's an insult.
That depends on the surgery.
And it's an insult. Yeah, that's right. He's like, I'm going to go outside. Oh, you're going to have cataract surgery? Well, I'm going to go outside and spit in some mud and then come in and wipe it on your eyes. Right? That's an insufficient answer. If you're the Speaker of the House and you're in politics and you're asked, hey, how do you view government? Look at the Bible. That'll be my answer. That is such an insufficient answer. It says to a lot of people, including me, that's a message he's sending. That wasn't an answer. That was hinting at how he's going to approach things as a Christian nationalist. That he thinks that the Bible is the guiding documents.
Is the law of government.
For the government.
Yeah. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, Doug, you and I will be sharing in a presentation November 30th in Holland called Confronting Christian Nationalism. And we are doing this in partnership with 11 different churches in Ottawa County. The name of this group is the Ottawa Coalition of Unifying Christians, specifically because Shawn, as you know, this local group, Ottawa Impact, is really a driving force in politics right now in Ottawa County, is at the Board of Commissioners level. And it's my opinion, and of others too, that the driving ideology for them is this Christian nationalism. So, Doug, in the presentation that we'll be talking about, I want to make sure that we kind of hit some of these things so that we can, kind of tease our audience into coming. So the first thing is defining like what is Christian nationalism, which we, talked about a little already. And then why Christian nationalism is a threat to the church and the state. And then talking about the 5 different streams of Christian nationalism, the kind of the outgrowths, or what does it look like in various ways. Engaging with Christian nationalism with empathy and just empathy and engagement for those who adhere to it. The 7 mountains mandate, which you mentioned, and then 5 ways to confront it in the public space. So, is there anything more that we should hit upon to let the audience know, like, hey, these are the things we're going to talk about, and this is why they should come to an event.
I hope that people don't fundamentally see this as fear mongering. Like, hey, there's a boogeyman out there, and we're going to describe to you how the boogeyman operates and what bad things will happen if the boogeyman keeps doing boogeyman things. Because that doesn't help anybody, right? Here's the threat of, it's like the CDC having to tell us about monkeypox. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like, I'm just worried now about something that I don't even understand. And what I know it's real, but I don't know, what am I supposed to do with that? So we're not going to do that. We're going to try to actually do the opposite. We're going to try to function in a way that deeper understanding can help us not be worried and afraid of the shadows. So what is it? Why do your neighbors believe it? 50-60% of Americans hold Christian nationalist views, that America would be better if we acted more Christianly. Okay, so what is it? What can we do about it? And where can the answer come? And look, my view is, we don't need to tell people in the United States to be quiet. Any solution we want to a problem, or any series of responses to a predicament, are not going to be made better by telling people to stop talking or sharing ideas. So we shouldn't go around and tell Christian nationalists to be quiet. That's just, first of all, it's not going to work. And secondly, it's not a plan, right? So what should you do? Provide an alternative for people. People don't change by stopping belief in something. They change by swapping a belief. We tend to exchange one idea for a different idea. There's a lot of people who only hear Christian nationalist stuff. They don't even know that's what it is. They don't even know there's an alternative. Like, I grew up eating Velveeta cheese because it makes great grilled cheese sandwiches. And I didn't know how poor we were when I was a kid. We were pretty poor. It wasn't until college that I realized, okay, first of all, Velveeta is made from soy. It doesn't make it any less delicious.
I didn't realize that.
But it is not made from milk. And it's not made from cows. It's great for vegans. They tend to love it. I think they might have a hint of milk where they can't have it. I didn't know the difference between cheeses, right?
Yep.
I wasn't committed to Velveeta because I was opposed to, a cheddar. I just didn't know there was a difference, right?
I gotta get Velveeta
what a lot of
now.
us just need is someone to tell us, here's a better idea. Try this one on for size. And churches that don't do any talking about how Christians should engage in public life. And look, frankly, there's a lot of this that goes on sort of subtly. I hear Democrats, when they want to talk about pushing a bill that's going to move federal dollars to support people in poverty, they sometimes hint at or literally say, the book of Matthew, chapter 5, says that we should love our neighbor as ourselves. Don't use the teachings of Jesus to justify the political spending on either side of the aisle. You may want to say, hey, and some of your faith traditions might also support this, but our fundamental rationale is not Matthew chapter 5, or as we will show in the event video recordings of Jeff Sessions, the then Attorney General of the United States, quoting the Apostle Paul from chapter 13 of Romans when he's implementing the child separation policy at the border. Like, this is just not how this should function. But there is a lot, and there's a history that we have to go through that's not as clean. We've used the Bible and religious teachings to support our political views nonstop in this country. So what's the alternative to that? How do we do it? I hang around a lot of progressive Christians. We're not any more sophisticated than the conservative Christian nationalists about this. We just say different things, but we don't have all that much more sophisticated of an understanding of the role of faith, politics, and the common good. It's very underdeveloped. So part of what we want to do is help people start the process of becoming a bit more sophisticated in whatever they're doing in their churches or friendships or whatever influence they have, to be able to be more sophisticated at this than most of us currently are. That's the point of all of this, right? Empathy, engagement, and a greater set of options that we have. I have a friend that works in addiction, and he works in addiction specifically in prison, in jails. And he said one of the things that I had to learn as an addiction counselor was that when people who are addicted are using the drugs or behavior that's detrimental to them, from their perspective, the use of that drug is their current best option. They're not doing it thinking this is my worst option.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be given a better alternative option, not be told that's a dumb thing, stop doing a dumb thing, because they're like, I'm not doing a dumb thing, I'm doing the best thing here.
Like so moving from cigarettes to vaping.
What's that?
Like moving from cigarettes to vaping.
There you go. There you go.
Alternative.
Yeah. You know,
so
standing to sitting, walking to standing, you know, that kind of stuff. Like, find a way to give somebody an alternative. And most of us are just not. Most of us don't care about this stuff, right? Like, who wakes up in the morning and says to themselves, I wonder what kind of an alternative we could put in place as a nation to be a better option than fundamental Christian nationalism.
Nick?
Yeah.
Me and Doug.
So, okay. You know, we don't have a lot of, we don't have the nation's brightest on this one, right? Like, we're humming along doing the best we can. So it's a real problem that we're not throwing a lot of great solutions at. So that's part of what we want to do, is to engage people in this, because this is just, frankly, it's not only is it important right now and it's good for religion and everything, it's one of the fundamental questions of this country. So much so that the First Amendment to the Constitution goes right after this.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The First Amendment, freedom of speech, say whatever you want, freedom of religion, practice whatever you want or don't. We're still struggling in this country with who gets to say what about religion. So it's a fundamental American project. And we don't do civics very well. And I'm not saying we have to get all the way into the 13th Amendment, if you know what I'm saying. We could still be working on the first and try to get better at that one. Because I'll tell you, some people have sure figured out how to be really spot on the Second Amendment, but they can't seem to figure out the first. And we could do this better, is my point. And so it's a project that I think fits, and that's kind of what we're trying to be up to.
Well, this project, again, for the listener, will be happening Thursday, November 30, from 6:30 to 8 p.m. in Holland at the Holland Armory. So we'd love to have you there and participate in this project and discussion, because it's a timely discussion in Ottawa County.
Hey, Nick, I don't want to interrupt your landing the plane, but I just got a text from Casey.
All right.
Who happens to be in Holland, Michigan this weekend, sends me a picture of the newspaper that says, hey, you made the local rag. So apparently
Oh,
there's a news story there in Holland that I'm holding up to the screen for you to see.
yeah.
There's local pastors against Ottawa Impact to host confronting Christian nationalism event, and there's a picture of me.
That's
Talk
fascinating.
about perfect timing.
Yeah, the coalition church group, they put out a press release, and I guess that came out this morning. Yeah, and they had a big old picture of you on there. So that's fun.
That
Just
was
while we're talking about
that
it.
was at that event that we did with the guys running, the three guys that were running for the county commissioner jobs at Ottawa in Ottawa County.
Okay,
I
that's
mean,
what
I
that's
remember
referencing
that.
to.
I remember
Okay.
that. I just remember the photo. I know
Oh,
when
okay.
that photo was taken, which I think now is in the just the records there of, it's how newspapers work. They keep
Yeah.
a database of things tied to names.
Well, Vote Common Good's got plenty of photos in their database around the Holland and Ottawa County area by now. So, Doug, how do outside of people connecting with us at this event, how do people connect with your work as they move forward?
Yeah, votecommongood.com is our website. That's the cleanest place to find all of our links to podcasts. We generate typically 3 or 4 podcasts a week, video curriculum. We do live streams of all the podcasts, so it's all on all the platforms, and we're just kind of pushing all this stuff out sort of all the time, and that's the primary place, and that'll get you links to all the other spots. So the website votecommongood.com.
Mm-hmm. votecommongood.com. Well, thanks, Doug, for spending time with us this morning. And
I got two last questions to try to throw out there while we're wrapping this up for Doug real quick.
All right, go for it.
So on the I'm wondering, on the blue hat, red hat, do you guys ever swap sides where you run the red side, he runs the blue side, and just kind of see each other's perspectives? And as far as the Republican side goes, I know you've already said you don't want Trump. Is there somebody on the Republican side that you would like to see running, opposing the Democrats, that you might be interested in?
Sure. I'll start with that one first. Look, I voted for Republicans in my life, for president, for local offices, for state and federal offices. I could imagine there being a time when Republicans should be in charge of things in this country. Currently, the situation in the Republican Party is such a mess, and the influence of what I think is a very detrimental cult-like following of Donald Trump makes it nearly impossible for me to think that any of those folks would have the freedom to operate the way that any president should operate. They're so enamored by and afraid of the Trump followers that they're really stuck.
So kind of no hope for that side of the party, you think?
Well, I think it needs a longer time to bake before it's ready.
Yeah.
and I don't think a year from now it's going to be ready. Having, if Donald Trump pleads guilty to his one or multiple crimes, which I think he will, and I think he will work out a plea deal that will keep him from running for office. So sometime this summer, I think he's not going to be on the ballots in the states come election day. That's what I think is going to happen. I think the party's going to pick Nikki Haley. And when they do, that's going to cause a real problem for Democrats, because there's a lot of never Trumpers that will come back home. There's a lot of, I think Biden's too old and I really want a woman president. And I don't really care. And I think she could be elected president in the fall. Cleanest chance. If Trump's the one, he's not going to win, in my view. So I could imagine that, and that would be less bad. I mean, I think I have lots of thoughts about Nikki Haley, but I think that might not be as bad as some other people like a Ron DeSantis or something that's just trying to be Trumpish about it all.
Gotcha.
Because none of the other people are going to, because Trump is just he's the center of which everything in the Republican Party revolves around. On the question of do we try to take each other's views, I should have mentioned this, that primary purpose of us doing this project is we want to get to the point where we could speak on one another's behalf in a way that I could say, if Casey were here, he would be comfortable with me saying this is his view. I can speak for him. I want to know his views well enough. So we do that in each episode. We try to have a time where we're like, okay, so what do you think I would say about this?
Okay.
Right. So we're really trying to, that's the empathy side of it, is trying to know the person's argument. The idea first popped into my head watching an episode of The West Wing, that TV show from a long time ago, where that was the project of a Supreme Court justice. He was speaking to somebody in the White House and was making this argument, and the person in the White House was saying, Justice, I don't understand what you're doing. I didn't know those were your views. And he said, oh no, those aren't my views. Those are the views, of the people that I disagree with on this. But the important thing is that I know their views well enough, so I know what I'm disagreeing with.
Yeah.
Now, because politics are more personal than they are policy, it's harder to just talk about policy when you do that. You have to put a little personal flavor in it, a little bit of the why does it matter to you? How does this function in your life thing? And that's really good, because then you're able to say to someone, you have attributes that you believe are good and I believe are good, and you believe that this belief you have serves those attributes. So trying to find that is important. Because look, I mean, anybody can say, oh, I'm going to figure out how to not be afraid of people different than me. Okay, right. Fair enough. It's much harder to be like, I'm a little bit afraid of somebody who's so much like me, until you get to right there. That's what makes me nervous. Right. It's because really what people are afraid of is themselves, right? They're like, oh my gosh, what if that dark shadow side of me ultimately comes, right? That's what freaks them out. That's why people are more freaked out about their family and friends and loved ones than they are about strangers they don't know anywhere. And look, if you don't have any family or friends who think differently politically than you do, and you don't talk about it, okay, maybe you don't know how this all goes.
Oh,
but
we definitely do.
Who've moved around and changed their views and vote for different people at different times. And, it's a small sliver of society too, that's ever voted for anybody for outside of the same political party that they always vote for. Pretty rare.
Yeah. All right, Shawn, I'm going to land it. Anything else?
No. Good. Those are the two little nuggets I had floating around in my head that I wanted to make sure I got out by the time we got to the end there.
Well, good. So I have a question for you, Shawn. Do you have a Johnny Cash song that is always right in your tongue or always in your heart?
Oh, it'd have to be Folsom Prison.
Yeah. How come?
I play in a local band, and that's one of the songs that I actually play and sing when we would do that one. So that's CCR and Rockin' in the Free World.
Oh, is that right? Does it just fit you, or is there something about the song that you really?
It fits me a little bit more. Performance wise, with the way I do it, it fits me better.
Yeah.
We're a rock band, so we don't play it. Don't. We play it and go. We pick the tempo up a bit. And it's one of the songs that I heard first of his in a buddy's car when it was playing, and the lyric, I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. I was younger and running across the lyric like that. I was like, man, that's kind of crazy. That's pretty deep,
Right.
So yeah, that'd be the one that's always kind of stuck in my head.
Yeah. Right on.
Take us out, Shawn. Take us out with a lyric. Go ahead.
I just did.
Do you want to sing it? Do you want to take us out on a
how
note?
do you sing it?
No, you're not doing that to me. You're not doing that to me.
Like, you don't have to sing
just to watch him die. There.
Okay.
All right. That's all we're getting for today. All right, Doug. Thanks a lot for your time. For walking us through, Red Hat, Blue Hat, Christian Nationalism, and we'll chat soon.
We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, Doug.
Absolutely.
Bye,
see ya.
Just like that. I think he was testing me. I think he was trying to make sure that I knew Johnny Cash and it wasn't just wearing a cool shirt, huh?
Well, I even tested you, try to make you sing the song. All right, so I don't know, final thoughts, big takeaway, anything?
Well, I thought it was the end there when I asked him if there was somebody on the Republican Party that, you know, if Trump wasn't running or whatever, and you know, obviously he doesn't want Trump to begin with, if there is somebody on that side of the aisle that he thinks would be a good runner. It was kind of what I was trying to get at, was to see who he thought on the Republican side would be which we kind of got an answer. He said somebody. He didn't necessarily say somebody he thinks he would want outside of, he thinks she would be less detrimental to the U.S. economy or whatever than others like Santos or Trump or whatnot. So, but I find that interesting, because now I feel like I'm going to do maybe a bit more research on that person. You know,
on Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley. Just to see a bit more what she's about, because you know, you watch Fox News or anything like that, it's you know, Trump and Dos Santos and everything like that. So asking a question like that gives me a little bit more of an angle to look at and to see where he thinks, you know, on an opposing side of the aisle that he doesn't isn't the biggest fan of, type thing. You know, if you get what if that's coming out right. So, and I'm definitely going to listen to the blue hat, red hat, because that definitely sounds like a conversation I would really enjoy listening to. Because I feel like I relate with his buddy a bit more. I feel like the two of us kind of relate like they do a little bit. You're definitely dug in more, and I'm definitely on the my feelings and emotions about things more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely give it a listen. I think it's just a fun conversation between two friends, and really interesting to gain just a different perspective. So on that note, we're going to wrap it up by directing you to listen to some of our other podcast episodes on Spotify, iTunes, and Buzzsprout. You can find these podcasts, the Common Good Conversations, at our website, where there's a link to subscribe and listen on there, or you can catch these on our Facebook page at Vote Common Good West Michigan Primary, and the website is Vote Common Good West Michigan. Hey, if you support our work and want to continue supporting the work that we do, we would ask that you donate. There's a little donate button on our website, and that'll keep these conversations going. So that's all we got today. My name is Nick Brock and
Shawn Skinner.
We'll see you next time, friends.
See you guys.
Peace.